big news. I mean, we've covered Javier Milei, his eccentricity, and his extremism on this program. We spoke to Jacob Sugarman, who I think it was Jacob, who wrote a bit about him and the nation. But now that he's been elected, the crackdown has started, and for our audience who maybe missed some of that and may not be familiar with who Milei is and why his election in Argentina is so scary to people. David, if you could just give people a rundown of what he stands for and what his candidacy was and what he promises to do as president.
Sure. I think that the story of Javier Milei will ring will sound a bit recognizable to a lot of your listeners and viewers, because I think in many ways it mirrors a broader story that's relevant to the United States of what it means when an eccentric, media-friendly, charismatic right-winger who seems in many ways like a clown in the ways that he's kind of dunking on the establishment, doing operas about dollarization and the importance of free market principles.
Has an elaborate hairdo, that
totally.
Kind of deal.
But I think that these eccentricities always belied a very serious and a very dangerous vision of Argentine political economy. So it was always clear that Javier Milei was playing with a considerable degree of very righteous discontent among the people of Argentina, who had just lived through a single year, degree of inflation that basically meant, their life savings was flitting away, and playing with that discontent with a false vision, but a very potent one, of how to recreate Argentine glory, how to revive the Argentine economy, how to guide Argentina into a new global economic configuration in which the individual would be liberated from the shackles of state support. So there's two aspects that I think that need to be emphasized. One is the danger, the potency of that particular political economic vision, that hyper and sort of anarcho-capitalistic vision that Javier Milei has. And the other is the broader coalition that he formed, because it wasn't Javier Milei that entered power together alone. Rather, he entered power in coalition with what you might call the law and order right. So we're 1 week into this presidency, and we see two major components here that each of which are kind of represented by those two aspects of the coalition. One, the more anarcho-libertarian aspect that Javier Milei heads up, and one, the more law and order one, represented by his Justice Minister, Patricia Bullrich. I'll start with the second one, because the one that you mentioned him in the outset of the program, which is this total crackdown on civil society. So just days into the presidency, Patricia Bullrich, with support, of course, of the presidency of Javier Milei, announced this unprecedented crackdown on street protests. Now, for them, they say it's just, for people who block traffic. But of course, any form of street protest is going to involve blocking the circulation of traffic. And Argentina has such a rich tradition. I mean, everything from recovering democracy from its military dictatorship to winning some of the most powerful rights of universal education and a pension and labor, right? Some of the most potent and mobilized trade unions in the world, who rely on this civil social weapon of street protests. So they come out with this decree, this law and order decree, that basically says, if you're there, we're going to strip you of all social welfare support from the state, no matter how poor you are, no matter how desperate you are, no matter how much need you may have, right? So you could be in that trapped position of a marginalized Argentine citizen where you're marching because you don't have access to decent health, housing, or education. And because of that, you're stripped of little support that you have. But on top of that, they're going to report you to the migration authorities in case you're a migrant, so that you may be stripped also of your residency permits to live in Argentina. They're going to form a national registry of all agitating organizations. If this is ringing a bit fascistic, I don't think that's an accident. And of course, they're sending out the armed forces, the diverse federal forces at their disposal, to break strikes, to crack down and arrest protesters, and of course, anyone can be arrested for circulating traffic. So the phrase they're using is, he who blocks traffic does not get support from the state. But it's even more dangerous than that, because they're really threatening to basically, criminalize any form of street-based dissent. Now, Emma, I'm very pleased to be speaking to you today. I know that this order came out some days ago, but last night we saw the first kind of counter mobilization against that crackdown. And we just saw thousands and thousands of Argentines, porteños, people in the capital city in particular, pouring onto the streets in violation of that decree to kind of stand up for their civil and social rights. I think that was really exciting. And the narrow reason for that mobilization, if we can come back to the question of what is the coalition that brought Javier Milei to power, I talked a bit about the law and order aspect of it, but the liberalization aspect of it is just as important. So yesterday, Javier Milei gave his first major decree to the nation from his office of the presidency inside the Casa Rosada presidential palace, which is unprecedented in the history of Argentina. 600 articles of a decree that reads as one of the most extreme documents of neoliberalization that you can imagine. I thought, Emma, for your viewers, I could read a couple of the list a couple of these decrees. So here's just a handful of the 600 decrees that are delivering on, this would be a wet dream of a Chicago boy back in the Pinochet days.
Yeah.
We got a repeal of the rent law to solidify dollarization in the housing sector, repeal of the supply and shelves law, potentially leading to monopolistic practices and the exploitation of consumer rights, repeal of the national procurement law, a very important one, which is one of the main tools of the state to promote industrialization and innovation, repeal of the industrial promotion law, which again is another way of kind of stripping out state support to allow for liberalization and of foreign corporations, repeal of regulations preventing the privatization of public companies. Of course, Javier Milei really wants to push full-scale privatization of telecommunications companies, of railways, etc. Reform of the customs codes to prohibit any kind of export controls to protect the Argentine economy from total colonization from foreign corporations, repeal of the land ownership law, enabling significant foreign ownership of land in the country. And all of these decrees, all of them basically bypass Congress. So the way that it's working, the way that it works in Argentina is that this 600-point decree, which again, I think will go down in history as one of the most extreme forms of shock therapy ever delivered to any country over the past 100 years, only needs the support of one of the houses of Argentine Congress or their silence, their kind of non-resistance to this. And so, I think it's not in combination of this kind of law and order and the extremity of the economic program and the criminalization of opposition to the economic program. I think it's reasonable to speak of a kind of legal coup that's underway in Argentina, which basically is taking 40 years of democratic social, economic, and political reform in service of people's rights and, of course, their responsibilities, and just eliminating it, just taking, the delete button and in one fell swoop, just kind of basically eroding or eliminating and throwing into the dustbin the fights, the struggles, the rights that were won by successive generations of Argentines mobilizing in the streets in defense of their rights. And the question then becomes, is Argentine society going to put up with this? Milei, as I'm sure you've mentioned on the show, won by 11 points. Comes into power with a very significant mandate. And I think it would be wrong of us to pretend like this was some minoritarian gesture that doesn't command a lot of popular support. So there's a deeper question about what it means to engage with Argentine society in this moment, what it means to kind of create a front line of civil defense. And I think that's a common story that we're seeing, whether it's in the United States with Donald Trump, or whether it was with Bolsonaro, or any of these figures who, we can't deny the popular mandate that lifts them to power. Of course, in the U.S., we can talk about all we want about an electoral college that's structured in ways to deny, the actual manifestation of the popular vote. But it's kind of beside the point. Like, there's still a huge proportion of our country of origin, the United States, but these other countries across Latin America, where these kind of cretinous right-wing hardcore extremists really do command a lot of power and support. So the question becomes how to make visible the clear and imminent threat that this decree poses to people's most fundamental and constitutional rights. And for all this to be happening on the 40th anniversary of Argentina winning back its democracy from that U.S.-backed military junta, I think is even more depressing. So that's a kind of the broader conjuncture of where we're at. I'm sure I can go into any one of those points more specifically.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much there, but you really, really summarize it quite well.